A node tree doesn't have to be complicated. It can be as easy as walking through a forest. You don't need parallel nodes or compound nodes. You don't need to split up your exposure into 5 different nodes. You can do it all together and still get pro results. Before we get into today's video, guys, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, and this is not the best method to make a node tree or whatever. It's just what works for me, and I think you should know about because it's a great way of making a node tree. I would also like to highlight the fact that you need to be knowing what you're shooting. You just can't expect to put any footage into DaVinci Resolve, apply this node tree, and it's going to work perfectly. You need to be shooting the right way. So for this specific example, we're going to use 2 shots, one on Sony a7S III S Log 3 and one on DJI Air 2S in D-Log. You also have to make sure that, I've spoken about this in a different video, but you have to make sure that you have the right color management on, which is DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate as your timeline and Rec 709 Gamma 2.4 as output. There's a helicopter that's literally flying above my house. Right, let's dive right into our color page. We're going to create 6 nodes. I like to create all my nodes at the start, and I like to name all of my nodes. The first one and the last one always are color space transform, because we're taking the footage, the camera footage from S-Log3, for example, to DaVinci Wide Gamut. We're going to edit in DaVinci Wide Gamut, and then everything that comes out is from DaVinci Wide Gamut to Rec 709. So the first one, camera to DaVinci, last one, DaVinci to Rec 709. Everything in the middle is our look, is our grade. So we're gonna name all of the nodes. So the second is gonna be our primaries, the third is gonna be our color, the fourth is gonna be our look, and the fifth is gonna be our grade and halation. Now, I actually have a shortcut to name my nodes, which is N, and you can personalize this within your keyboard customization. I don't think there is actually a shortcut for it set as a basic. I think you have to double click and name the node, but I like to name my nodes, so I set this as a shortcut. The reason I decided to edit this way and to create the node tree this way is because I like to grade chronologically. So I start from the first one and go to the last one. Some people do the opposite. This is just the way I do it. So the first node is our primaries, and here is where we adjust everything related to exposure. So the first thing I usually do is create an S-curve. Depending on the shot, depending on the exposure, I create a different kind of contrast in every shot, obviously. But for this specific one, I think a very subtle curve where the shadows are a little bit crashed and the highlights and midtones are a bit more pushed up. This usually helps create a bit more contrast and just make the image looks better. Then we're going to jump into our primary wheels, where you can have access to a bit more in-depth control onto your shadows, midtones, and highlights. And here is where I usually just play around and make sure everything is well balanced and take down the highlights and just make the image looks good. And once we're happy with the whole exposure of the image, we're moving on to the third actually, node, which is color. Color is everything regarding about color, obviously. And the way I want to do it, it's not necessarily the best way to do it, but I really got used to it because I'm a very visual person. So there is 2 ways of retouching colors. One is through the color curves and one is through the color warper. It's pretty much the same thing. The curves is like a flat line, and you can play around with it and move the color up and down in hue and saturation and brightness. And the warper is just one little hexagon, and you can move things around. You can push and pull color from the center and creates more saturation, less saturation. So it's definitely a different way of working, but I'm a more visual person, so the hexagon color warper, it's just more what I'm used to. So for this example, if you want to take something red and make it orange, you would just take the last point, drag it, and it's done. It's very easy and it's very intuitive, and this is why I decided to use the color warper rather than the curves. Moving on to the next one, which is our look. The look can be done in different ways. It can be done with a LUT, can be done with a native LUT from DaVinci, can be done with color wheels. You can do the look whatever you want. It's just the style of what the colors should look like and the whole image, and you know what actually makes a cinematic or what doesn't, you know, doesn't matter. So for this example, let's do it using the primary color wheels. Here we have control over midtones, highlight and shadows, which is what we want when we create a look, because usually what I like to do is add a bit of warmth to highlights and midtones and remove warmth and add a bit of shadow coolness to create this nice color contrast, which leads to a beautiful cinematic look. But if you do want to add a LUT, maybe you have a LUT, maybe you have my LUT, link down below. Maybe you just want to use a DaVinci native LUT. So all you're going to do is take the LUT, drag it and drop it, or double click on it. It will go automatically into your node. And now it looks horrible because all LUTs are too overpowering. So we're going to go down here and decrease the opacity to 30 to 40%. I find that 30 to 40% is the sweet spot for LUTs generically. So if you do want to use a LUT, I recommend using this. Then moving on to the last node, second last actually, because the CST is the last, but the last color grading node, it's our grain and halation. And this is what takes away the digital look that most of today's camera have, because I love my Sony a7S III, but I also hate how digital it looks, and I wanted to make it look more cinematic, more like film, which means we need the image to look a bit softer, add some grain, add some texture, have a bit of halation, especially if using a photography lens like this one. It's way too perfect and I don't like it. So we're gonna drag and drop the halation effect into our node, and here you can control the strength and the threshold just as you like. Usually just adjusting the strength makes it for me, but it really depends what style and look you're going for. And then down at the bottom there is actually a grain little button, so you can take that off and adjust the size and the strength. You could also add a node after and add film grain like that and have a bit more control, but if you want to do it more simply in the same node, you can do it this way. And there you have it. If we turn all of these nodes off, this is what we started from, this is where we are now. The image looked way better and I'm pretty happy with the way it looks, and I'll be happy to use this in any of my videos, honestly. And now let's go back to the second shot, which was a DJI shot. So what we're gonna do is grab all of our nodes, Command C, Command V, copy and paste it. And now it's gonna look weird because the CST at the start, the color space transform that we have at the start, has Sony S-Log3 going in. But obviously it wasn't a Sony, it was a DJI. So we set that to DJI D-Log and D-Gamut, and that should fix almost everything. You could probably adjust the contrast and saturation because every camera reads the image, reads color differently. So you always need to do a bit of retouch every time you're working on a different camera. But in this example, we don't have to adjust actually that much because we didn't do a heavy grade. So there you have it. Hope you guys learned something new. I hope you can use this node structure with your next videos, and I'll see you guys in the next video in a couple of days. Peace.